Welcome everyone. My name is Adam and I am here at our South Jordan location. Welcome to SMCC Online. I hope that wherever you're at in your journey in faith or your next steps with Jesus, no matter if you're a believer or not, Christian or not, that you'll be able to find today's content both hopeful and helpful for you. And I love being here at our South Jordan location, but we have 5 locations throughout Utah. We've got South Jordan, Draper, Lehi, our international campus in West Jordan, and also our St. George campus down south. Really, we would love at some point, whenever you feel comfortable and safe, to come visit one of our locations and to meet some people. We think we've got some really great people at our locations. But maybe if crowds are a little intimidating for you right now, maybe you're just not ready for that step yet, and we get that. We're trying to make things as safe as possible at our locations, but maybe you're saying, I just can't do big crowds right now. That's all right. We have small groups starting up for the fall. And small groups are really just groups of people from about anywhere from 6 to 8 people to maybe 12 to 14 people. And we think that might be a better option for some of our people as well. We would love for you to join those and look on our website and see what's available in your area. But also just as much, we want you to hear from somebody that was impacted by a small group at SMCC. So I want you guys to watch a quick video from Katie. She was impacted by a small group at SMCC. She tried a few groups until she found the right one, but she realized a great story. I'd like you to take a look and watch that now.
So I knew I needed a group when I realized I didn't really know God. I didn't really know who he was or his character. I had grown up realizing that if I did this, God would do this, or thinking that, and then I had someone tell me that's not really how he is. So I decided I needed to know my Bible. I needed to learn my Bible. So I wanted to join a Bible study so I could learn who God really was. Joining a group was difficult for me because fear, anxiety. Are people going to accept me? Are they going to accept where I came from, how I am? I'm loud. Are they going to be intimidated by that? And so I tried out a couple groups and they didn't work out. And then I finally found my group in the fall of 2017, and it just fit. Sometimes you don't find a group at first, so encourage people to keep looking if you don't find the right group. But just going and praying and knowing that this is what God wanted for me. So group has impacted my life in the fact of just having a community to live life with. We've gone on trips together, we've Saturday brunch, we've had girls get married, we've had girls have babies, we've also had grief and loss and stuck together through all of that. And so it's learning how to live through life in the Bible together. How does God want us to react to these things compared to what the world tells us to do? And being able to have that team with you to help you through it.
For 21 years now, SMCC has been having Vision Sunday. And when we say Vision Sunday, we're not talking about God, downloading something onto Pastor Paul's brain or something, right? Our lead pastor. That's not what we're saying. What we're talking about with Vision is just what is the preferred future of our organization, to kind of once a year circle back and to say, where are we headed as an organization? Now, last week, if you missed it, I'd encourage you to watch it. Pastor Paul, our lead pastor, he went through a message on theological precision. And today what we get to do is jump into a message with one of our teaching pastors, Eric Nelson. He's going to take us through the second week of our Vision series, talking about community. And I think this will be really helpful for you. So let's go ahead and dive in to week 2 of our Vision message with Pastor Eric.
Hey, I'm Eric. I'm one of the pastors here. Thanks so much for tuning in online. I'm here at our South Jordan location. If you live in this part of town, I want to encourage you to check it out at some point. Now, I want to begin today with a question. When was the last time you had an eye exam? If you're anything like me, maybe it's been a little while, because I am not a fan of dimly lit rooms with strangers who sit just a little bit too close and look into your eyes as if they're peering into your soul. It is all just a little bit too awkward for me, so I'm not a big fan. But on top of all of that, it makes me a little uneasy to know that my vision over time continues to slowly fade. It continues to get worse. Now, when it comes to taking the eye exam test, I usually start off pretty well. I mean, when it's these big letters and these big numbers at the top, man, I start off and I'm crushing it. But then as it gets to the bottom, and maybe you can see this from home, but maybe it's a little fuzzy. When it gets down to the bottom, the letters, the numbers, they start to lose focus. They start to get just a little bit fuzzy. And eventually, I just start guessing in hopes that I will get something right. And I usually don't. Let's just say I am nowhere near 20/20 vision. It's a little scary to know that over time, my vision continues to get ever so slightly just a little bit worse. And this illustrates a principle that exists in our world. And the principle is this right here. Vision fades. Vision fades. This isn't just true with our eyesight. This is true with organizations and companies and teams and relationships. And yes, of course, even churches. Vision fades. Over time, the mission, over time, the vision, it kind of gets fuzzy and we lose focus. And over time, we just start to guess at why an organization or perhaps a church even exists in the first place. And so once a year, we want to talk about the vision of SMCC because we know over time, vision fades. And so that's what we're doing over these last 2 weeks, a 2-part series on the vision of SMCC, where we want to talk about what it is that drives us so that we can have clarity and we can regain 20/20 precision when it comes to why we exist. So this really is our check-in. This is our checkup. And so we want to talk about why we exist. And to do that, we want to look back at the things that Jesus has commanded of us. We want to look again with clarity as to how He expects us to live, both individually and collectively. So let's dial in our prescription as we head into the fall with something that Jesus once said. It's very familiar. Jesus says this to His closest followers and to someone who asked Him an important question. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Like, what's the main thing? What's the big picture, Jesus? What is it? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Like with all that you are, love the Lord your God. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. Love God and love people. Now, when it comes to this idea of love, this is a word that we get a lot of mileage out of. In fact, I think our culture is both nearsighted and farsighted when it comes to this concept of love. I think most people would say love is what our world needs right now. And if there was just more love in our world, things would be so much better. And I agree with them. But if you were to then ask them, well, what does love mean to you? Please define love. You would get a lot of different answers. Love is one of those words that means so many things to so many people that it's basically a pretty abstract concept for most people. I want to correct that today. So I want to give you the clearest definition of love that I've ever heard. And then I want to show you how Jesus lived out love in this way. Have you ever considered love like this? Devotion to plus delight in equals love. Love is the sum total of a person's devotion to another person and a person's delight in another person. That is what love is. Devotion to plus delight in. Now, for most of us, I think we lean one way or the other when it comes to our definition, our default definition of love. Devotion to. When people talk about love, love is all about duty. It's about action. It's about sacrifice. It's about service. It's about doing something. It's all on the devotion side. But if you'd ask other people, love would be all on the delight side. It's all about an emotion, an intense feeling of great affection and an attitude perhaps towards another person. It's all about devotion, or for some people, it's all about delight. I wonder which way by default you lean. Are you a person who thinks love is typically about action? Or are you a person who thinks love is typically about in affection. Today, I want to bring these two ideas together. Love is the sum total of devotion to plus delight in. Now, when I read that passage from Jesus where he talks about loving God and loving others, I bet most of us were pretty familiar with it. We've probably heard that before. That's not new to us. But imagine this. Imagine you're sitting down for coffee with a close friend. I mean, you just heard that they wanted to follow Jesus and they had some questions, so they took you out for coffee to ask you some questions. And they asked you this question. Hey, I know I'm supposed to love God, but what does it mean to love God? How do I love God? What would your answer be to that question? Or maybe you're watching this and you just have that question. You're not helping somebody else with the question. It's your question. Or maybe you haven't decided to take a step towards Jesus yet because you don't even know what that looks like. You don't know what it means to love God. What would you say to all of this? Well, a lot of people would answer the question from the delight side. To love God, well, you know what? I don't really know, but you should just really love him. And then another person or pastor might say, no, it's not good enough to really love God. You got to really, really love God. And another sermon might be like this. No, you have to really, really, really love God, you know? And that's how you know your love for him is growing and the relationship's getting closer. You really, really, really love him. And I've heard sermons like that. Like, do you really love God? No, I mean it. Do you really, really love God? And I look at that and I'm just like, that's not clear enough. That's not helpful enough. I mean, I can't just kind of level up in my energy and use my willpower and somehow like love him more. Is that how it works? But on the other side, the devotion side, a lot of people answer the question of what does it mean to love God with this? Well, you have to read and you have to pray and you have to give and you have to serve and you have to read your Bible and you have to be good and be moral and be like this and be like this and do more of this and do more of this. And the more you do it, the more you must love God. And it's all about devotion as seen in action. And more action equals more affection. More action equals more love. And I look at those two explanations for what a growing relationship with God looks like. And I think to myself, it can't be one or the other. In fact, both of those explanations seem to be lacking something. How do we bring these two things together? Well, it's not devotion or delight, not action or affection. It's these two things together. Let me show you what a growing relationship with God looks like. Here's how love for God grows. Take a look. It's really my devotion to God plus my delight in God that equals my love for God. My devotion to God, that's obedience. Plus my delight in God, that is joy that sets in when I know that his way is actually a good way for me to live. It's my devotion to God plus my delight in God, both ideas coming together that it equals my love for God. Now you might be thinking, Eric, that sounds great, but what would ever motivate this? I mean, what would ever move somebody to devote their lives to God and then delight their lives in God? What would move somebody to that place? Well, I'm very glad that you asked. See, it is possible to be devoted to someone or something that you doubt is devoted to you. It is possible to do that. But it is very difficult to find delight in someone you doubt delights in you. It is very difficult to enjoy somebody that you doubt enjoys you. In fact, we could say it this way. It's impossible to delight in someone that you doubt delights in you. I mean, you might devote your life to them for a while to try and earn their love, but over time, come on, we know how exhausting that is. And if someone doesn't delight in you, over time, you might just turn and walk away from them because their lack of delight just feels like rejection. It is very difficult to delight in someone that you doubt delights in you. So with all of this in mind, can I read you something that when I first read really changed my world? Look at this. We love because he first loved us. This is the Apostle John who experienced Jesus' love firsthand. And he says, you know what? We love him because he first loved us. And this is still true. Now, if we're using our definition of love to understand this, here's what it means. Because God was devoted to us, and because God actually likes us, he delights in us, we know that he loves us. His love for us is seen in his devotion to us and his delight in us. And as we experience all of that, we can then delight we can delight in him. Now, as our world talks about the importance of love, the problem our world is up against is that the love that the world needs, we just don't have to give. I mean, everybody's saying the world needs this type of love, and if this type of love existed in the world would be a better place. And I agree with all of that, but I just don't know very many people who have a love in them like that to give to the world. You can't share what you don't have. If you haven't received it, you can't give it to someone else. I mean, I would love to write a $5 million check to fund an orphanage in some place that really needs that. I just don't have it to give it. I just don't have it to give it. You can't share what you don't have. And I think our world is desperate for love, and everybody's saying the world needs love and we should all be more loving. I just don't think we've received a love like that to give. But Jesus offers a love like that for us to give. Let's read this. In the book of Romans, we see this. God demonstrates his own love for us in this. He demonstrates his love, devotion to us, and delight, because it's built into love. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While we were still sinners, not deserving of his devotion, not deserving of his delight, not deserving of his love, what did he do? He still loved us. Christ died for us. So God is both devoted to the world, he delights in his creation, and therefore we know that he loves us. And when we understand this, this motivates our devotion to him and our delight in him. It's his love for us that leads us to then love him in return. Because he first loved us, we can now love him. Now, I've been married to my wife, Carissa, for coming up on 12 years now. And, without having to manufacture more love, our relationship has more love in it than it did on day one. Without having to manufacture and muster up more love for her, I love her more now than I ever have. And lately I've been reflecting on how that happened, how that came about, because it kind of came about as a byproduct. But it came about as a byproduct of two things that I've experienced from her. And if you've been paying attention through this message, I think you know what those two things are. Her devotion to me and her delight in me. She committed her life to me, and for some reason, she enjoys being around me. And when I experience her devotion to me and her delight in me, it causes me to want to devote my life to her, and then I find delight in her. Because once someone delights in you, it's possible to delight in them in return. And as this has happened in our relationship for 12 years, love has grown. And it's grown as a byproduct, because love is a byproduct of two things together, devotion and delight. So as I experience her devotion and delight in me, it's easy for me to return devotion and delight to her, and then it's easy for her to return devotion and delight back to me. And this is how love grows in a relationship. Now, back to the eye doctor for just a moment. There's nothing quite like the moment where you put on a new pair of glasses for the first time. They dialed in your prescription, they've put together the new glasses, and you put them on, and you see with precision, you see with clarity. And maybe you've lacked that for quite some time. I love that moment. Understanding the gospel is like that. When we understand the gospel, we can see clearly some things maybe we could not see before. We see clearly what it means to love God, and we see clearly his love for us. See, the gospel is not an umbrella term for all things Jesus-y. Gospel is a precise term. It's a technical term. It means good news. And the gospel is the good news of the substitutionary work of Jesus. That he took what we deserve so that we can have what he deserved. And when we understand the gospel, it's like seeing the world with a new set of glasses and seeing things with clarity for the first time in a long time. And I want to show you a passage that will help us see how this great exchange or this great substitution has worked. Take a look at this right here. Paul writes to his friends in the city of Corinth. He says this, God made him, and the him here is Jesus, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us. So Jesus had no sin, but our sin was, and this is a big theological word, imputed to him or passed over to him. Our sin was laid upon him so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. So as our sin was placed on him, his righteousness has been placed on us. And this changes everything. Our sin was imputed to him. His righteousness was imputed back to us. And this is the great exchange. Sin exchanged for righteousness. And now our verdict, our standing, it is no longer a guilty verdict or a guilty standing. Because of what Jesus has done, it is a righteous verdict. It is a righteous standing. And consequently, God is just as pleased with you as he is with Jesus. Wow. Let me say that again just in case somebody missed it. Because of this exchange, God is just as pleased with you as he is with Jesus. That is what it means for his righteousness to be yours. And so we can be sure, because of passages like this, that God delights in us as he delights in Jesus, his Son, whom he is well pleased. Because of the righteousness of Christ, God doesn't just love us, he likes us, he delights in us, and he is pleased with us. And this changes everything. Here's what I want you to see. The more delighted you are that God delights in you, the more devoted you'll be. So let me ask you a question. Do you really believe that God delights in you? Do you really believe that God enjoys you? Do you really believe that God is not just putting up with you, but that he likes you? See, he's not angry with you. He's not out to get you. He's not holding things against you. If you have trusted Jesus and that exchange has happened, man, he looks at you and he delights in you. And when we understand this, when we understand how much he delights in us, I think it's easy for us to delight in him. And when we delight in him, like any relationship, it's easy to then devote ourselves to him. And as we're devoted to him and as we delight in him, love for him grows. This is how a loving relationship with God thrives and flourishes. Now, this doesn't just extend to us and God. It actually extends beyond that. It extends beyond that. See, when we are devoted to him and delighted in him, when we love him, as we just read earlier in Matthew, we should then love other people. Now, Jesus at one point in the gospel story, the gospel narrative of John, he does something that the disciples really struggle with, they wrestle with. He does this thing in the first century that was just a shocking act of love. We hear about this and we think it's kind of unique and maybe a little off-putting, although I saw this happen at a wedding one time a few years back. Jesus, in the middle of a meal, stands up and he does something that only a servant would have done. He washes the disciples' feet. I mean, this is an act of humility. I mean, Jesus is placing himself below these disciples and they cannot understand why he would do this. But he goes around and he washes their feet one by one and he comes to the end of this moment. And he says this to his followers. He says, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And by this type of love for one another, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." So Jesus expects us to demonstrate our love for him by devoting ourselves to and delighting in, that's my definition of love, other people. And as we do that, people will know who we belong to. This is what Jesus has invited us to do. This brings precision to our relationships, and it brings precision to what love looks like in those relationships. That there are some people, not everybody, because we can't do this for everybody, but what we wish we could do for everyone, we can do for one, and that is devote to and delight in. Now, the world that we live in right now makes this harder than maybe ever. We live in a socially digital world and a socially distant world. And in a world like that, it is very difficult to love in the way that Jesus has invited us to love. So here's what I've noticed over the last 6 months or so since this pandemic, but this spans, longer than that. It goes back before that. Take a look at this right here. As access to content has increased. Investment into community has decreased. And content, this is helpful and hopeful messages. This is ideas and concepts and facts and information. All that content has increased. But as content has gone up, here's what I've noticed. Connection, community, maybe we could say love, it's decreased. There's been this kind of switch where content has gone up, but community, for some reason, has gone down. I mean, never before have we had such access to incredible podcasts full of great content. And at SMCC, we have one. It's called the Fully Delighted Podcast. Check it out. I think it's pretty good. Never before have we had such access to great content in podcasts and great content in messages and sermons. And I think we have some pretty good messages and sermons around here. You can find all those online, YouTube, Vimeo. I mean, you could listen for hours. Never before have we had such access to incredible music that communicates who Jesus is and allows us to respond to all that. We have such great content right now. I mean, you could literally 24/7 engage and consume incredible content to your heart's desire, and yet not love people. Not love people. And so here's what I've seen happen over the last few months. People have engaged content like never before. I mean, content is like king, and everybody's running after content and consuming it. And then people are saying, but look, content's not everything. We need community. And so people are kind of lashing out against content and saying, no, it has to be all about community. And here's the thing. These two things actually go together. These two things fit together. It's not one or the other. We need both. And here's why. On the wings of content, community takes flight. I mean, think about it. Shallow relationships usually exist because the conversation and the content of the conversation is shallow. I'm convinced the deeper and richer the content, the information, the messages and the conversations and relationships, the deeper that goes, the deeper the community can go as well. I mean, when I'm just talking about cycling or mountain biking or golf with my buddies, that's all we talk about. The community is based on simply that. It doesn't go much deeper. But in places like my small group, in Bible study, the content goes deeper, and therefore the community becomes much richer. We need both. We need great content, and we have some incredible access to that, but that cannot replace great community. But you can't have great community without great content, because on the wings of content, community over here, it really does take flight. Now this fall, we have a new tool, a new resource of incredible content for our church at SMCC. See, the experts say this. The church might fill about 60 minutes of a person's week. If you're watching this, just 40 minutes. Now, if you don't watch every week, I mean, that number goes down. But the experts say 90 hours of content is consumed by most people through social media channels, entertainment, cable news, and everything else that people stream. I mean, just look at that. 60 minutes a week to 90 hours a week. And if you feel anxious in this season, if you feel isolated in this season, if you feel alone in this season, it might have something to do with these numbers right here. So we want to provide you with a tool, and a tool is always meant to accomplish a purpose. We want to provide you with a tool that can sort of shift these numbers and provide the content that you need to increase the community that you need. And that tool is called Right Now Media. Right Now Media. It's very interesting. A lot of people have described it as the Netflix of content that will help you thrive in your relationship with Jesus. And I think that is a great way to talk about it, but it's a little bit more than that. The church that I grew up in, it had a library in it. And the library was really interesting. There were books everywhere. It was a massive room. I don't think I ever saw anybody in it. Because as content has shifted to digital, libraries like that have kind of become irrelevant. Although, as we know, content will always be relevant. Right Now Media is a bit more like a library. I mean, imagine you were in Pastor Paul's office looking at his bookcase and you saw all the books on a wide variety of topics. Just imagine those topics live inside of this resource right here. That's what Right Now Media is. In fact, I want to pause right now and show you a quick clip of what Right Now Media is all about. Check this out.
Welcome to our study of the Gospel of John.
I have fallen in love with the work of Paul as I've studied the book of 1 Corinthians, and I believe you will too.
This is where Jesus taught, in Capernaum. And you have to understand this scene.
The Lord is my shepherd. And over the next 6 weeks, we're going to look deeply into the 23rd Psalm.
Right Now Media. It's for groups. It's for personal devotion. It's for parents.
The bullseye of parenting is to raise children who become like Jesus.
It's for kids.
This is Phil. We're digging into the Bible, which, as we've mentioned, is more than just a book.
It's for tough times.
So when you recognize that you're trying to have a conversation with your spouse and they're not ready to talk, it's not helpful to keep pressing them.
It's for every phase of life.
If you've made mistakes with money, you know what that makes you? Over 12.
And now, it's yours. We've purchased a Right Now Media subscription for everyone in our church. So check your inbox for the digital invitation and download the app for instant access to thousands of biblically based videos. Get equipped. Get inspired.
So Right Now Media is a tool that we think everybody who calls SMCC home can engage. In fact, if you can operate Netflix, Hulu, Sling on a Roku device or an Apple TV, or if you can cast from your phone to a TV, if you can engage any content digitally, you can engage and utilize Right Now Media. In fact, today, if you call SMCC home and we have your email, you're going to get a link to Right Now Media. And on Right Now Media, you can watch sermons and clips of communicators from conferences. You can engage in Bible studies. Some of the best talks from some of the best thinkers out there. It's incredible content. It's incredible content for you, but it's content for a purpose. It's content designed to increase community. It's these two things coming together. If we don't have your email, you can just jump onto our website, click the link, and get signed up for Right Now Media. We think this will make the small group experience this fall better than perhaps ever. Now, here's the thing about content and community. Check this out. Community offers you something that content cannot. Community offers you the opportunity to love people in a way that content cannot. And as we've seen, greater content, richer content, it really adds to richer community. Sometimes I find myself pulling through the fast food line and I'm digesting a meal in my car as I drive away quickly. I'm consuming content, but it's not content that leads to community. The other night, Friday night, we had our good friends Tony and Tessa over. My wife made a lovely meal. It was curry. It was delicious. There was this incredible content on the table, and it led to incredible community. These two things, they really fit together. And we want you to experience the value of both. But content cannot offer you the opportunity to love people around you. And as we've seen today, that is exactly what Jesus commands us to do. So at SMCC, we have 5 core values, but 4 of those cannot be lived out in isolation. Cannot be lived out by listening to a podcast or watching YouTube on your computer, listening to some great communicators. These 4 things have to be lived out in community, and here they are. It's extremely difficult to belong from a distance. At SMCC, we want you to belong before you believe. And you might feel like you belong through these messages, and that's fantastic, but you'll really feel like you belong when you engage in life with people. It's very hard to belong from a distance. We think maturity is about love at SMCC. We think growing spirituality is about love. That's what we're talking about today. It's very hard to love from a distance. It's extremely difficult to grow. It's to grow from a distance. See, at SMCC, we honor the process that God changes people from the inside out. And the best way to experience that change is to experience it with other people. And it is extremely difficult to serve people from a distance, to serve other people the way that Jesus wants us to serve other people, because that is how we love other people. We need to be around other people. So I want to give you a question as we kind of come to the end of this 2-week vision series. It's a very simple question. It's a question about who are the people around you that you want to love this fall. The question is this: who am I devoted to and delighted in? Who am I devoted to and delighted in? For me, I was thinking about this question in my own life. There's a group of people that I'm devoted to and delighted in. We meet on Weeping Cherry Circle. Weeping Cherry Circle every Wednesday night, and we we talk, we engage content, and we talk about life. I mean, this is my small group. This is my Bible study, and I delight in them, and I'm devoted to them. We've been together for quite some time. And there's also our staff. These are people that I'm devoted to, people I'm delighted in. So who are the people that you're devoted to and delighted in? Might be the first graders that meet in an SMCC classroom. Maybe those are the people you're devoted to and delighted in. Maybe it's your coworkers at lunch. But who are you devoted to, and who are you delighted in? Now, all this brings us to our bottom line. Our bottom line is this: your relationships, the people that you're devoted to and delighted in, they will determine the direction and quality of your life. And this right here is why you can engage incredible content 24/7 and still feel isolated and still feel alone. We need people, because people determine the direction and the quality of our life. So, what does a growing relationship with God look like? What does a loving relationship with God look like? It's a relationship where we are devoted to Him and delighted in Him because He is devoted to and delighted in us. And all of this spills over into devotion and delight with other people. And as we've seen, vision fades. And so if we've lost sight of this, we want to gain clarity this fall and move forward, knowing what it means to have theological precision. That was last week. But now we know what it means to have relational precision. It's devotion to and delight in other people. Let's do that together this fall, because as we do, the world will know who we belong to. And as we do, we will honor Jesus by loving people. And as we do that, we will discover there are other people who delight in us as well. Would you pray with me? God, thanks for a chance to focus in on something that's very, very common. We know, if we've been following Jesus for any length of time, that it's about love. Love for you and love for other people. We've heard that. But we've heard that so much, we maybe have lost sight of what that means. God, I thank you that you're devoted to us and that you delight in us. And we know that because we know the gospel. And the gospel tells us that. And so, God, I thank you that as we understand your delight in us, we can delight in you. And I pray that we would take what you've said, Jesus, and take what you've done and then live differently towards others. That we would devote our lives to others and delight in others this fall. And I just pray a very simple prayer that Right Now Media is a very helpful tool for our church, where content and community come together so that we can love you and love others. It's in the great name of Jesus that we pray. Amen. Hey, we want to sing a song now that allows us to declare our trust in Jesus for everything that He's done. He has started something incredible in this part of the valley, in this state, and He's not done yet. Let's sing about that now.
Fire, but we won't fall. We will never be alone. You'll always be enough. You'll always be enough. Now in God we trust, in His name we hope. I know God will not be shaken. God is here with us. He's already won. I know God will not be shaken. God won't be shaken. No. We'll follow where you go. We'll trust through the unknown. I know you go before. I know you will. forever secure. In you alone. You'll finish what you've begun, forever strong in your love. Your name is sure, and you will fight for us, our hope forever secure. In you alone. Now in God we trust, in His name we hope. I know God will not be shaken. God is here with us. He's already won. I know God will not be shaken. God will not be shaken. God will not be shaken. He won't be shaken.
Thank you again for joining us for SMCC Online. And if you enjoyed today's message and the content that you were able to see, we would just ask that you go ahead and share that on social media, or maybe text it to a friend. Or maybe even more so, if you want other people to be able to take their next step at SMCC and just know about the hope that Jesus has for us, we would encourage you to go ahead and make a donation. You can do that online at smccutah.org/give. And next week, we hope that you join us again. We are starting a new 6-week series called Reality Check, and we think it's going to be pretty helpful for you. So thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.